How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Josh Hutchinson, and I've got John Binko with me here today. How you doing, bud?
I'm good, brother. I'm living life. I am through Tuesday at least demolishing my matchup in my one remaining playoff league. So 20 literal points through Tuesday. Didn't miss a point on a player yesterday. Only one player with only 1 point yesterday. So I'm hoping the rest of the week treats me kindly. But at this moment, I'm destroying my competition, and I could not feel better. What's new with you?
That's awesome. I'm in the finals in a couple leagues. One of them being the Apples and Genos Patron League, the Bangers Cats League. I'm in a tight matchup there. And then I'm in my Cacupful finals, which is really exciting. So I'll be moving up in Cacupful tiers guaranteed. But I'm trying to push my way up into tier 5. It's a really tough matchup. The guy that was in against the first place team. He was in first place a good chunk of the year and made a lot of really good trades to upgrade his team at the end of the year. I'm going to say that politely.
Those weren't the words you used off there.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. Like if you're able to pull off deals and maybe win a number of trades against other managers, that's good on you.
What?
That is
It is
what it is.
I feel the exact same way. I'm not a fantasy trades hater. If you pull off a trade with another manager and the rest of the league feels like you just like peeled them back and gave them one, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's what? Good on you.
Send the offer. Send the offer.
Ultimately, I wish it was me, but it wasn't. So it is what it is. It's still a pretty tight matchup, but it feels like I'm a little outmatched just in terms of quality of players head to head, but that doesn't necessarily matter. My streams have hit. I was just talking about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. All of my streams have been hitting, and I've just been trying to keep pace, and it is pretty tight. So I'm hoping that something magical happens and I can pull this one out, maybe get a nice new t-shirt. But anyways, that's I mean, yeah, things are going okay, I would say, in my playoff matchups. But we're getting down to it. This is one of our last midweek podcasts, I think, for the rest of the season. It might just be this week and next week. I guess we'll have to talk about that. But we're getting down to it. This is finals week for a lot of people, and it's exciting. I'm feeling the heat. I'm getting excited for playoff hockey, but it's also like a little bit stressful.
I can't wait to talk playoff hockey with you, like in general, not necessarily on the air for the viewers. Yeah, lots of
100%, man.
Lots 100%. Of
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully it's all good vibes for both of our teams. All right. Thanks again for leaving.
We're totally going to meet in the finals. Now that you said that,
we'll see.
We're totally going to meet in the finals.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty awesome, man. That would be pretty exciting. All right. Thanks again for leaving us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you haven't and you're enjoying our content, please just take a second, leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate it. Also, check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. It's a great place to talk fantasy hockey, get your questions answered, and also receive alerts for when new Apples and Genos content drops. And if you didn't already know, this is Midweek Moves. It's Wednesday, March 29th, and we're talking about schedule maximization, who you should be adding and dropping at this point. And at this point, we are getting down to it. I guess I already said that, but all right, let's talk about the rest of the week this week. We're talking Thursday to Sunday. There are a number of teams with 3 games left. So Anaheim, Boston, Carolina, Columbus, Detroit, LA, New Jersey, New York, the New York Rangers, Philly, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. All of those teams have 3 games. The heavy nights aren't as heavy as they were last week, and the light nights aren't as light. Actually, you know what? Sunday is technically a heavy night, not technically an off night, even though there's only 9 games. I know I mentioned that last week, but it's worth reiterating that it's likely that you're going to be able to fit people into your lineup on Sunday, even though it's technically a heavy night. So the two teams out of that huge group of teams that avoid Saturday, which is the most important. Saturday is the busiest night. The New York Rangers and the Detroit Red Wings, they both avoid Saturday. So they're really ideal streaming teams at this point. There are also three teams that only have two games, but those two games are on the Friday and Sunday. So they also avoid the Saturday. Those teams are Calgary, Vancouver, and Winnipeg, a little Western Canada party there. And next week is a bit of a weird week. A lot of people won't even be playing fantasy hockey next week. But there are some leagues that go right until the bitter end. So in Yahoo, there are it goes from April 3rd to April 14th. So it's almost like a 2-week span. And it's really going to be difficult to stream people, essentially. The heavy nights are extremely heavy. The light nights are extremely light, even more so than last week. And it's not pretty. So the teams with the best schedules, there are 4 teams that have 7 games over that stretch. Those are Buffalo, Colorado, Nashville, and Seattle. Colorado and Nashville play on 2 off nights, and 2 off nights are the most off nights that any team has over that stretch. And there are very few teams that have that. So Dallas has 6 games with 2 off nights, and then Calgary and Anaheim have 5 games with 2 off nights. The rest of the teams in the league have either 1 or 0 off nights. So really, really tough streaming schedule. I don't know what to tell you. It's a bit of a wasteland at that point. There's going to be a lot of people resting. It's going to be a tough week if that is your finals week. So, do you have anything to add about the schedule here, Binksy?
Well, given that it's such a long period and that the schedule doesn't necessarily lean towards streaming level players, right? With there being such a lack of off nights, what I will be doing, pray that I make it into this finals matchup for that ending week, will be especially attacking the teams that play on Monday and Tuesday to open up this massive period, right? And those 3 teams, Seattle, Vegas, and Nashville, all have a Monday, Tuesday back-to-back to open the week next week. No team hits Monday and Wednesday, and no team hits Tuesday and Wednesday. So in those first 3 days, you absolutely need to get 2 games out of that schedule, and you're getting it from Seattle, Vegas, and Nashville. All 3 of those teams have just a glut of players that are going to be sitting on your waiver wire. I implore you, go into your week with at least one of your ads being Seattle, Vegas, or Nashville, right? Nashville not looking as good because of injury concerns, but there's plenty more to choose from. Seattle, plenty to choose from, but you never really know who's going to be the guy, right? And Vegas, there's a couple of guys you can choose from, but they're probably snatched up, right? So I implore you to choose any one of those 3 teams and make sure you get at least one of their players that are getting in on those back-to-backs, and then move on from them as their schedule lessens throughout that massive period. But if you are still continuing, if you made it to the next round and you're working in week 25, you've got to get one of these 3 teams. You've got to get one of these 3 teams to start with, and then see what happens throughout the rest of the week. But spend at least one of your ads working on these guys, because that is a massive advantage if you can get 2 games in 2 days in such a big period.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I didn't mention, but there is a Friday in there, Good Friday, where there are 0 games. So that's not super helpful either. And that's part of the reason why some of the nights are loaded up so much, I think. Yeah, so let's talk about our ads for this week. So I have a couple guys that you should be adding, and I mean, I don't know if this is really a big secret at this point. Especially one of these guys, David Perron, 42% rostered, plays for the Detroit Red Wings. I said you should probably be looking at the Red Wings and Rangers for streams for the rest of this week. I stand by that. They avoid that Saturday. David Perron, I streamed him in Kakupful to get 4 games from Tuesday to Sunday. Got a hat trick last night. That was pretty amazing. That worked out swimmingly. And you know what? He's playing on the top line, top power play, playing with Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin's been great all year. Really the only consistent Detroit Red Wings player offensively this year.
Yeah.
But David Perron, I watched part of the game just because I had a vested interest in that stream, and he looked great. Like I thought he looked like, I don't know, like a little bit like the David Perron that we know and love. So I mean, part of it was, I don't think the goaltending on the other side was super strong, but I mean, he was still getting to the net and getting to those spots that he normally gets to. So I am a fan of a David Perron stream at this point just because of deployment. His ice time's gone up as well. And yeah, just a great schedule the rest of the week. The other guy is Filipino, also had a goal last night. Also another guy I streamed and it worked out. He is one of the more attainable Rangers, and in my opinion is probably your best option out of like the second tier players on the Rangers. He just is more consistent than guys like Kako and Lafreniere. And just, yeah, I trust him so much more. He generates more himself. He's been shooting pretty well and pretty consistently, like getting 3-4 shots a game the last little while, even with not a ton of ice time. So yeah, I mean, the options for the Rangers are pretty top heavy, so it is kind of hard to stream players in from there. But if you are going to stream a Ranger the rest of the week, I think Filipino's your guy. He's also only 17% rostered currently, so that's, I mean, that's more easy pickings than Perron for sure. So more likely that he's out there. What do you think, Binksy?
I like both of those ad options. They were on the short list for me for this week for the show. I'm definitely more concerned about Filipino given the serious fluctuation in his time on ice, right? Like they have such incredible talent in the top 6, and it seems to me that depending on who they're playing, he may or may not get more or less time on ice, right? And it's hard for me to tell what the opposition means to his time on ice. Like you're looking at 2 games back to back against Carolina, and in the first one 16 and a half minutes, and the second one 12 minutes, right? Like his time on ice is all over the place, and as we've seen with Hedl, at least recently in the season, it doesn't necessarily depend on how much time he gets on ice to see how like worthwhile he is as a fantasy player, but it does scare me that his time on ice seems to go like this even in such a small period. So of those 2 players, I'm leaning more towards Perron, and I also lean more towards Perron given that they're playing Carolina, Winnipeg, and Toronto. And all 3 of those teams, you never really know what you're getting out of an opposition with the 3 of them. Like, obviously, Carolina and Toronto have been playing better as of late, and Winnipeg absolutely hasn't. But with those 3 teams, it just feels like you never really know what you're getting out of a fantasy opposition out of the 3 of them. And obviously his time on ice is way higher. His opportunity cost is way higher with Perron, but you know, you're talking about 25% rostership higher. So it's that much more likely that you're not going to get Perron. Mm-hmm. But I like both of those players. Just the 2 of them in a vacuum, I'm definitely leaning Perron. I'm definitely leaning on Detroit and their top level players versus New York and their lower level players. But I really like both of those options.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. Who is your ad this week?
My ad this week is and also ran in this 3-team remaining in the week. And I got to throw this in there. I'm not sure if this is a typo by you or if this is something that I messed up, But Ottawa is also playing 3 games this week.
Oh, did I not put them in?
I'm not sure if we missed that on the list. I'm not
Okay,
sure
yeah,
if
may
I'm
have,
reading the
yeah.
wrong schedule.
No, you're 100% right. Yep, you're
Yes.
100% right. I missed them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Soundbite that. I want to clip it. So Ottawa is playing Philadelphia, Toronto, and Columbus. And Jake Sanderson is 29% rostered. He's got Philadelphia Thursday, Toronto Saturday, Columbus on Sunday. Shabbat is likely to miss the rest of the season with an injury. So this dude has already been eating minutes. So he's going to eat even more minutes. Only once under 22 minutes in the last 5 games played. Like the blocks and the hits are a given. And the offense notwithstanding, he is giving you a majority of the minutes on the first pair, most of the minutes on the power play, and minutes on the shorthanded stat. So if you're in a category league that awards you for the weird points, he's there. If you're in a league where you're just trying to get totals, he's there. And I feel like, and this is like gut feel central, right? So much opportunity, and he hasn't hit anything yet. Underlying numbers don't tell you this. This is pure betting on a tilt. But at this point, with so much opportunity, with no points, and him continuing to take shots, I feel like he's due. And I feel like he's due as a death knell in betting, but I actually feel like he's due. And now he's going to get even more minutes than he was getting before. I just don't see how it doesn't come through for you, especially with these being the 3 teams that he's going to play against.
Yeah, this happened earlier in the year where Shabbat went down and Jake Sanderson. I think we all a number of us bet on Jake Sanderson to really get a ton of minutes and get that opportunity, and he did, and he played pretty well across the board. He's not someone that was destroying worlds or anything. I mean, obviously he's a rookie. He's played extremely well. I think he's going to be a fantastic player, but my only concern here, and I think your reasoning is sound. I could definitely see him playing 30 minutes a night the rest of the week, because that's just how they deploy people, and that's how they deployed Shabbat when he was the only left-handed D with any type of, I mean, the only quality left-handed defender on the team. But now with Chikrin and Shabbat out, Sanderson's really the only one there. So my only concern is I was reading on Twitter that, I don't know if it was at practice or at the end of the last game, they were trying Travis Hamonic as the power play quarterback.
What?
So
what?
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's going to happen in the game.
I live on Twitter. How did I not see that, dude?
That is something that exists in the ether. And I can't remember who it was. I can't remember where I read that. Fact check me if I'm wrong. People that are watching, throw it in the chat if you know anything more than I do. But I did read that somewhere. I could be getting trolled, but yeah. So that is a concern. But yeah, I think your reasoning is pretty sound on Jake Sanderson, and he's pretty attainable at this point. My drop, I mean, I don't have a specific drop. I think I just have advice about dropping people going into finals week. If your finals week is next week, that long week right till the bitter end of the season, keep a close eye on players on your team that are in a very comfortable playoff position. I'm talking teams like the Boston Bruins, Tampa Bay Lightning, Toronto Maple Leafs, guys like Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, John Tavares, David Krejci. Yeah, but like essentially, like I'm trying to emphasize the quality of players like Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron. Just a few games ago, I believe it was Sunday, Bergeron and Marchand did not play, and it was essentially for rest. And that is like with 2 weeks left of the season, because Boston, obviously, like they're going to win the President's Trophy. It's not even close. So they can do stuff like that at this point, but that's going to happen even more going into next week. So just to warn you, those guys might not be a factor. So keep a really close eye on lineups. I would almost be willing to drop a Brad Marchand for a guy on the Senators, a guy on the Florida Panthers, teams that are trying to battle it out to get into the playoffs, teams that are going to be playing with some type of urgency. Um, it's a risky play. It's certainly a risky play, but it's something that you need to consider, and it's something that, like, I mean, it's do or die at this point. And if you're in the situation where you're playing that 1.5 week stretch, I mean, uh, I mean, it's do or die. I already said that, but you need to make drastic moves like that.
I
What do
absolutely
you think about that philosophy?
Man, I think that is a really forward-thinking philosophy in terms of the Bruins in particular. There are other teams that I don't necessarily believe that about. Notably in your list, Tampa Bay. I don't necessarily believe that about them. I believe more that, especially seeing Maroon hit the top line to open a week, that they might be more inclined to get players up to speed for the playoffs
Sure.
instead of rest them. But for Boston in particular, for Marchand and Bergeron in particular, I absolutely believe. I absolutely believe that will be the
Yeah.
process. And considering, I don't know about Bergeron recently, but about Marchand recently, about Bergeron recently, but Marchand recently, that has been the case. He's not really been showing up in games, and
No.
whether or not he's injured and they want to rest him, or he's just tired and they want to rest him, that has definitely seemed to have been the case. So I would be paying more attention to rest for the Bruins than anybody else, but I definitely think it's something to look out for them specifically, if not for the rest of the league.
Yeah.
For my drop this week, I went a little bit more specific. We seem to be trading off in that regard. I would really strongly be considering dropping Matt Zuccarello. 86% rostered at this moment on Yahoo. He's got one game left this week away on Saturday versus Vegas, right? So full slate away once versus one of the better teams in the West. He's got 0 goals in the last 5, 2 in the last 10. And ever since Kirill Kaprizov went down, he's got 7 points in 10 games over that pretty large stretch at this point, and primarily on even strength assists. Even though he's been shouldering a big 19-24 average time on ice and almost 2.5 shots per game, he's shooting 7% recently. He's got nearly no bangs, no PIMs, no positive plus minus, no face-offs. There's nothing to give you outside value other than him scoring, and I do not want to rely on him scoring on even strength face-offs right now in crunch time.
100%. I 100% agree with that. I think Zuccarello, the magic is gone, as Nate mentioned on the previous podcast. Something about turning back into the 300-year-old woman or whatever it was. I was kind of half
Were you
listening.
listening?
Honestly, I was
I
doing
was
something
listening
else.
live. I had to hit him with a comment. Sick reference, bro. Sick reference. Also, I type with 2 fingers if you're watching
Just
live.
like that, yeah, like on a typewriter in the 1930s.
Indeed. Sick reference, bro.
So Mr. C says, just back to our conversation about the Bruins and resting players, how about DeBrusk? I think for me, my opinion on this is DeBrusk has been out for a lot of time, so I don't necessarily feel that he needs rest. I don't know that the Bruins are going to feel that way. I have no idea what John Montgomery thinks or his thought process. You might have a little more insight into that, but I think DeBrusque is less likely to be rested just because he's younger and he has missed significant time recently. So I don't know that rest is necessarily top priority for him specifically, as opposed to like the older guys that are like essentially near retirement, like Bergeron and Krejci, and I guess you could throw Brad Marchand into that mix as well. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, man?
Well, I mean, in looking in recent deployment, you're getting power play time, right, with DeBrusque, and you're getting line time that is lower than what you would normally see at his skill level. But they're also kind of flip-flopping who would normally see the majority of time for them as a team. So it's hard to rely on them just kind of flipping the roster upside down right now. But that is what we can expect from the Bruins, right? We can expect them to turn the bottom six into the middle six and the top three into just kind of floating through the game. And with DeBrusque, you are getting power play time. So I like DeBrusque and I also like Bertuzzi, but I also don't really trust them in that same wavelength at this point. I don't really trust it, right? Like my gut says they're going to get more minutes, but it doesn't say they're going to get quality minutes with quality production. So I'm a little bit scared of it, frankly. And plus, everyone that they're playing right now sees them as the President's Cup.
Yeah.
In their race to go to playoff mode or even to just finish the season on a high note. So everybody is coming at the Bruins and I don't love it. Like I like Jake DeBrusque a lot and I like Bertuzzi outside of what he's shown us in Boston, but you're not going to see Hall, and those two guys scare me quite a bit in crunch time. They scare me.
Yeah. Yeah, that man, they have nothing to play for at this point. Like these games don't matter other than like you saw against Tampa Bay, they had a skirmish right off the opening faceoff, and I almost think it's like when the Bruins are playing teams that they're maybe going to face on their playoff run, they're kind of like, we're here, like we're ready. We're fucking ready, guys. Like we're
on the ice. Show us what you're gonna do.
We're the big bad Bruins, and we're gonna fuck you up. Like that's essentially
that needs
what
to be
it feels like.
We're the big bad Bruins. We're gonna fuck you up.
Binksy, why don't you run us through some injuries?
So I only really hit on the pertinent injuries for fantasy hockey. I hope that's okay. Leading off, Tage Thompson missed Monday against the Habs and didn't skate and practice on Tuesday. Brennan Dess at Dauber expects that rest was considering they don't play again until Friday against the Rangers. Do you believe in that narrative? Have you dropped your Sabres anyway? Are you done with Tuck and Skinner and the like?
No, I'm not done. Like they're still technically in it, right? So yeah, no, I'm absolutely still in on those guys, so I wouldn't be dropping them at all. I think they have a back-to-back Friday Saturday, is that right? I think so. I think they still have 2 games left, so
yeah,
Friday is a really light night too. So yeah, I'm definitely keeping my Sabres for sure.
Sam Bennett skated on Saturday, but remains day-to-day with an undisclosed injury to open tonight's game against the Leafs, as you and I were watching Duclair and Verhaeghe on the top line. So that's worth noting.
Yeah.
Kirby Dach missed Tuesday's game against Philadelphia because of an upper body injury. How many games did he make it? 3?
Yeah, not many.
During Monday's game in Buffalo, concussion spotters pulled Dach for an evaluation after he took a hit late in the game. So
I actually saw that replay, and it didn't look great. Like it was
bad.
Yeah, it was I think it was a cross check actually, like near the net, like driving the net, and he got cross checked right, like did not know it was coming type situation. So
fun.
That was it didn't look super pretty.
On the out jury, Matt Duchene, 32-year-old forward, is out week to week with a lower body injury, so probably won't see him again.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could say about that is play your Predators?
Yeah.
Mark?
I don't know. Like, they're so offensively, it's tough. They have no one left offensively.
But they
It's
seem to be doing so well with
they
the
got
no one
Cody
left,
Glass.
though.
Yeah, I guess so. Glass,
The no
Tomasino,
one
but I
left
almost
is doing so well, though.
yeah. Tyson Berry has been really good.
Really?
Like, yeah, man. He was my last week in Cupful. He was my second highest. He had the second highest amount of points individually
I paid
out of
attention to
any player
him
on my
for
team.
like the first 8 days after the trade, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, this is trash. No reason for me to watch this anymore." So he's turning around.
Yeah, he's been awesome, and he's lighting it up. Is Yossi out? I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah,
Is
still out.
Yossi's out? So he's quarterbacking the power play. He literally he's almost he's almost a top offensive option at this point. So he's firing the puck, which is
Well, you know what?
big. And
That could be a really serious ad for Monday, Tuesday of next week.
If he's out there, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's I held on to him in Cupful just because it's a deeper league, and I felt like they were playing him on the power play even with Yossi, so I was like, okay, I feel like there still might be some value here, and I wouldn't have won last week if it weren't for Tyson Berry. Truly, I can't believe Matt Duchene either. Matt Duchene had a great week too, and now he's out. But
write that down. Through a slew of Vegas injuries, Riley Smith is out with a lower body injury, wasn't on the ice for Monday's practice, and is likely to be out tomorrow versus San Jose and Saturday against Minnesota, for those of you still rostering Riley. Shabbat, like we mentioned, likely to miss the rest of the season. Yep. Shea Theodore left Tuesday's game against Edmonton with an undisclosed injury. Ryan O'Reilly has been stick handling and shooting the broken finger recovery timetable of 4 weeks. So nearly there now. Do you hear any Toronto buzz about him coming back early?
I would imagine that they'll probably get him in for a couple games right at the end. But I don't think there's by the sounds of things, I don't think there's a huge rush to get him back into the lineup just because there's not a lot to play for right now. They're pretty comfortably in the position that they're in. They're not going to really move up or down. They've got a pretty solid lead on Tampa for home ice advantage at this point. So I think just to get him back to game speed, they'll probably get him into a couple games in the last week, but I don't think it's imminent. But he is skating and looking good. Apparently he was taking shots on Matt Murray this morning. So
as a preemptive to the zero goalie check-in, injuries for the goalies, Cam Talbot has been practicing lately and could be available to play backup against Philadelphia on Thursday. A muscle strain has kept him out for weeks. So as a goalie, not too confident in muscle strains. Logan Thompson made his first start on the 23rd after missing roughly 5 weeks with a lower body injury. Unfortunately, and no one saw this coming, he left the game with about 6 minutes left. Reports indicate his departure was due to a lower body injury. So no one's telling exactly what that was. Ville Husso is currently being evaluated for a nagging lower body injury. He may miss the rest of the season. He wasn't playing well to begin with.
Yeah.
Aiden Hill, as of Monday, Hill hadn't returned and resumed skating. He's been out with a lower body injury for the past 3 weeks. And Antti Ranta is really, quote, close to a return. Could play Thursday in Detroit and Montreal on Sunday. He tweaked something in his groin in early March. So I would assume, him being a goalie and the injury being to his groin, that they would let him rest as long as possible. But Freddie has been playing like absolute trash lately.
Yeah. Freddie's not good. Freddie's not good, man. Kachekov might be the starter of the playoffs. We'll see. Freddie is
Doesn't
This
it
is
just
the
feel
Freddie
like
Anderson.
it should have been Kochetkov this whole time? Like they should have just gotten to the point where it was Kochetkov and Freddie is the backup, and they let Ranta just hit the bricks. Doesn't it feel like that?
I mean, Freddie's a goalie where his totals look great. His totals look great every year, but the stretch leading up to the playoffs and into the playoffs, he's not clutch. I guess that's the best way of putting it. Not a clutch goaltender. At least that was my experience with him in Toronto.
You're not clutch.
He would in every 7-game series, he would win them 2 games and then lose them game 7 essentially. Like I mean, not every single time, obviously it's a team effort, but there were definitely saves that he could have made in really big moments that he
You're
just
so diplomatic, bro. You're so diplomatic. You don't call anyone out, including me. It's great.
Great. All right, let's do a really quick 0G check-in here. So I mean, I guess if Ranta comes back, then he's definitely an option for spot starts. So maybe keep an eye on that. He wasn't on my list, but that's pretty key. Mad Sogart, 11% rostered, has had 3 straight quality starts against Boston, Tampa Bay, and Florida, which is pretty impressive. All of those teams generate quite a bit. I mean, Tampa Bay not so much lately, but it's still pretty impressive that he's playing so well against teams of that caliber. I think so. You mentioned that they're saying Talbot could back up on Thursday, which I think is interesting. I don't know if that's because Sogard is playing well, so they want to keep going with him. So if that's the case, I think Sogard is likely going to get 2 starts for the rest of the week. But definitely keep an eye on game day goalie starts, just to see if they do in fact decide to go with Talbot tomorrow. Because I mean, yeah, I'm not 100% sure that that's going to be the way it is. But regardless, Sogard is going to get at least 1 start the rest of the week. It seems like maybe because of the verbiage used that he might get 2. So definitely a guy I think he's probably your premium at this point in terms of goaltenders. Eric Comrie, who's 7% rostered, I mean, seemingly irrelevant for months, has had 2 starts in a row for the Sabres, and one of them he had a shutout. The other one was a quality start. So he's played pretty well for a couple of games in a row. They have a back-to-back Friday, Saturday, like I mentioned, against Dallas and San Jose. So I would imagine he's going to get one of those starts. Obviously, if he gets San Jose, it's probably preferable. So maybe worth a spot start. I don't know. Like, I mean, the game before these 2 games, he played against Dallas and allowed 10 goals. So I don't know. I don't really know if you can predict what you're going to get from Eric Comrie, but worth noting, he's had a couple of really nice games in a row.
I don't trust
Fair. Matt Murray is now 52% rostered. So, I mean, attainable at this point. He might be out there in your league. And he will play Saturday or Sunday. So probably a really good spot start there. He hasn't been the greatest. He's been playing from the eye test. I think he's played pretty well. In general, he's just allowing, I mean, there's a lot of goals. Like, he's not allowing bad goals. Okay. It's just, I don't really know how to, I don't know. I'm not trying to be, anyways. I mean, the eye test is,
I'll be your foil there. Matt Murray has been playing terribly.
Okay.
Terribly.
All right, that's fine.
I'll be the one to say it. You don't have to be the one to say it. Matt Murray has been the one of that tandem playing terribly. And fair enough, the 2 of them have not been playing especially well. But Matt Murray has been playing terribly, and I trusted him all season long to get into the playoffs and turn it on, and he absolutely has not done so. He looks terrible.
Yeah, I guess from a fantasy perspective, you would definitely know because you've rostered him.
I have
in a couple of places.
I believed all year long, so long, and no, he's terrible. I don't.
Well, he came up huge for stretches. He truly did. But yeah, right now, not the greatest, but I mean, I still think that there's potential for him to come out and have a really great game this weekend. So, I mean, I guess stream at your own risk.
True.
And then the LA situation is always a good situation. I mean, I don't know. I streamed Phoenix Copley for Sunday, and I almost blew my couple matchup because of it because he allowed 6 goals.
Yikes.
So it was literally like I'm watching at midnight. I'm like, oh my god, am I gonna lose? Am I gonna lose in the semis because I streamed Phoenix Copley? Are you kidding me? But Copley is likely going to get 2 games against Edmonton and Vancouver, and then Corpusalo will get Seattle. So you can choose whatever you need. I mean, obviously, the 2 games for Copley, that's pretty cool. You're gonna get 2, but then it's Edmonton and Vancouver as well.
Mhm.
And he
Yeah.
had that rough night on Sunday. So I mean, again, stream at your own risk. But Corpusalo, I think, is a pretty safe bet for the most part. He's been
I
a
like
pretty safe stream
Corpusalo.
most of the year.
Yeah.
Even in Columbus, even when he was playing in Columbus, he was playing well. So
I did not trust Corpusalo in Columbus, but I like King's
yeah,
Corpusalo quite
I
a
think
bit.
he's
Yeah.
he's going to be their starter into the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the way that the deployment's going, you're only going to get 1 game out of him for the rest of the week. So unless things change. And that's all I have here. I don't know. Do you have any other guys in mind?
No,
Those are the main ones for me.
no. Corpusalo was the
Okay.
guy I would hammer on. You finished with him, so
Perfect. All right, let's get into the mailbag then. The Pork Man is here, regular question asker. Who are some guys on your do not draft list for the next season, or at least not draft at the value they were perceived at this season? Listed. I mean, you have a list right here. So why don't you start, Binksy?
So I focused on the latter portion of the question. Do not draft at the value they were perceived at this season. I think it's a pretty easy top 5. John Gaudreau, Kyle Connor, Shabbat, Makar, and Forsberg. All of
Yeah.
those dudes easily dropped 2 rounds for me. And you're like, Makar, 2 rounds? Yeah, easy 2 rounds for me. Like just do not want to deal with the injury concerns and the playability of Cale Makar anywhere before the 3rd round. Like I'm not going to be the one to do it. The other 4, I think, are pretty reasonable drops given everything that's going on their teams. But number 4 on that list, I think, might draw some eyebrows, and I just can't do it. Like we had a ton of discussion about him being a top 5 value, and I am a huge believer in value above replacement players. But man, that is a stretch. If you're having to draft him in the top 10 like you were this year, or the top 5 like you were this year, it's not even close for me.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Matt Duchene ad nauseum. He's a guy that, okay, I mean, essentially, he's hurt me this year for sure. I bet on him just feeling like I could get him at value because people were so skeptical of his season last year, and I was like, well, he can't get that much worse. And like,
He didn't.
I mean, he's had stretches where he was okay. And actually, last week, I think I did mention this, but he had a really good week, and I mean, I wouldn't have won my semifinals couple matchup if not for Matt Duchene. But now he's out, and obviously he can't help that. But he's a guy I'm going to be staying away from next year. But in terms of guys near the top, I think Victor Hedman is a guy that I'm concerned about going forward, just because he never really figured it out. After, I mean, he's not always playing on the top power play, which certainly hurts. They've got Sergachev kind of rotating in and out, and he just hasn't been 80-point Victor Hedman this year, like not even close.
Not even close.
So, and that's what you draft him in the 2nd round for. So that certainly hurts. The Cale Makar argument, I think I'm not taking him at 5 where he was drafted a lot this year. I still think I'd probably, if he's there late first round, early second, I'm definitely jumping on that because I think there's a potential for huge value there because he's
Really?
at least value over replacement. Um, Obviously, like I try not to get too hung up on injury concerns. I guess is what I'm saying. And obviously, like a lot of people got hung up on injury concerns this year with Nikita Kucherov, and he's quietly third in the league in scoring and like well
Very
over 100
quietly.
points now. And yeah, I mean, has had a fantastic year. But if you looked at, I think I talked about this at the start of the season when we were talking about the Kucherov Makar argument at 5 or 6. I said Kucherov because I mean, he's paced for well over 100 points for so many years in a row. And there are these injuries here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to happen this year. And they haven't. And sure enough, he's one of the top scorers in the league. So, so for me, I feel Cale Makar has so much upside. He's still over a point per game, like well over a point per game as a defenseman, even with all of these injuries. And when he's played, he's been unbelievable. So I still think that he is probably the best fantasy option out there in terms of defenseman. And I'm probably still taking him late first round, early second. But yeah, I think his stock does drop a little bit, just because of the inherent risk with injuries, but not as much as I think you are. At least that's my opinion. Not as much as I think you're pushing him down your list.
No, it would definitely be third round for me.
Okay, that's fair.
After such a heavy affluent defense primary position in drafting this year, I'm
Yeah,
going to be pushing defense down a rung or two next year.
that's fair. I think on my points league teams where I didn't suffer, like my defenseman didn't suffer severe injuries, it still worked out pretty well for me. So I don't know that my philosophy has changed too much, but yeah, there are certainly like the Victor Hedmans, the Cale Makars, the John Carlsons, guys that really hurt you, Zach Werenski, guys that were drafted really high that really hurt you this year. And that's unfortunate, but I don't know. My philosophy has not, I guess we'll talk about this in the off season about our philosophy in terms of drafting and all that, but I don't want to get too long winded about this. I feel like I already kind of have. So let's move on. Googs, also another loyal question asker. Are we thinking Jack Eichel is a first round caliber player like he was in Buffalo? I wasted a lot of draft picks and Zibanejad to get Eichel last summer under that assumption, yet the dude kind of sucks ass. I used the injury excuse for last year because he had a broken thumb, but I think I'm done with him and will replace his spot in my keepers with Evander Kane or Georgiev. Thoughts? So my opinion in terms of Evander Kane and Georgiev, not Georgiev. Do not keep Georgiev. That's obviously like I'm an Apples and Genos 0G truther, so I don't like keeping goalies at all. But I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I wouldn't be keeping Georgiev over Jack Eichel. So what are your thoughts on Eichel, Binksy? I'm gonna just pull up some stats here because I was looking at this before when I saw this question.
So I mean, I think Georgiev notwithstanding, obviously, right? You're talking about Evander Kane or Eichel. It really matters the parameters of your league and how much having Evander Kane benefits you, right? So if the stats in your league benefit a banger player, then I would undoubtedly go with Evander Kane, right? You're talking about playing on a team that scores a ridiculous amount of goals, and for all likelihood for next year, you have a healthy Evander Kane, right? If we have a healthy Evander Kane for all of this year, it's probably not even a question, right? If you're looking at just stat to stat. But in a word, no. I didn't trust Eichel this year, and nothing has said otherwise all year long. But they've got 11 wins in the last 15, and he's hovering around 3 shots per game. he does just enough to tempt you in the third round as a general redraft player, and I won't be bit. Between Evander Kane and Jack Eichel, kind of almost regardless of format, I choose Evander Kane in terms of what you're going to have to spend to draft them. And as a keeper, almost ubiquitously, I choose Evander Kane. I don't know what you're spending to keep them. I don't know how your keepers set up for you to keep them and what stats matter to you. But almost across the board, I choose Evander Kane. And that's knowing that Eichel is nearly a point per game pace player.
Yeah. So that's what I want to touch on here. So just looking at some rate stats and comparing to career averages and career highs. Jack Eichel, so 59 points in 61 games this year. He has missed time with injury once again this year. So I mean, if you're concerned about injuries, then maybe you can factor that in. He has the lowest ice time of his career this year, 18:38 per game. But I mean, that's still not that's I think that's just a coaching philosophy thing. I think Bruce Cassidy rolls the lines a little bit more. Goals per 60 this year, 1.43. In his best year in Buffalo, you know what his goals per 60 was?
1.25?
1.43. The exact same. All right, let's move on to assists per 60. Total assists per 60. 1.69 this year. You know what is that same year in Buffalo where he had that top goals per 60, his assists per 60 was 1.67. So basically the same. He's had better years in terms of assists per 60. But one of them was the shortened season. That was a small sample size. That's when he went down with the neck injury. So I don't think those numbers are really out of character for him. Points per 60, 3.11. His best year, 3.13. So really, like, in terms of counting stats, in terms of points, he kind of is
what he normally is. Yeah.
Yeah. He's getting a little less ice time, and I think that hurts a little bit. But I mean, his IPP also not really that outlandish. It's 69.41. He's usually in the low 70s, so it's a little low, but not crazy. Shooting percentage, I mean, a little bit below his. Actually, you know what? It's about career average. It's actually on the higher end. I was looking at the wrong the wrong category here. Shots per 60, a little bit low this year, but not too outlandish. His shots per 60 kind of fluctuate. Individual Corsi 4 per 60, pretty average for him. Individual scoring chances 4 per 60, also pretty average for him. 8.34. They're down a little bit from last year. I don't think that these numbers are crazy. There is an argument that Eichel should be the caliber of player to drive a line no matter who is playing with him. But there is a factor of Mark Stone's been hurt a lot of the year.
You know, it's funny you say that, because while you're telling me these year-to-year averages, I'm wondering how much that spikes with him on the ice with Mark Stone. And at the same time, I'm wondering how much does that matter considering the health of Mark Stone in general for your drafts next year, right? Like how much is he impacted by having Mark Stone? And also, can you rely on Mark Stone, right? Like, so in the same breath, I'm like, does that matter? And then for fantasy drafts, I'm like, does it really matter? Because he probably won't play a full season with Mark Stone anyway.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, Mark Stone has, it's another back injury. That's not ideal, man. If you're having repeated back injuries, that's not really a good outlook long term. I don't think in terms of longevity of your career. That's just speculation, but not the greatest. But Jack Eichel, and in terms of being a top 10 drafted player, I don't think he's there. But but
he's got to get pushed hard by this season's top 10 players, right?
Of course, there's a lot of people. That's the other thing too, is offense has the league is just considerably more people are just scoring a lot more than they were a few years ago. So even though his stats are comparable, there are a bunch of people that have taken leaps, and the league average has taken leaps. So yeah, he was a top 10 player at that point, and he's scoring at a similar pace in terms of rate stats. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he is still a top 10. He should still be drafted in the top 10. I think he's more like a third round player at this point, depending on your league and your league settings. So, but that is kind of where he was drafted this year, and that's kind of where I would be considering taking him still next year. That's my take, at least. The Mark Skinner asks, "Hey fellas, looking for a few options with low roster percentage for the Friday Sunday games. Any suggestions? Going for the title in my home league. Hashtag A&G title. Who do you got? I've kind of already mentioned a couple guys. Actually, you know what? So we talked about Perron and Hedel. Calgary also has the Friday Sunday. I would be considering Andrew Mangiapane. He's kind of had good underlying numbers for a while, and he is starting to put the puck in the net the last little bit. So that's a guy that I would be taking a look at for sure if he's available. So who's your guy, Binksy?
I went a little bit further down the lineup in Detroit with Andrew Kopp at 13% rostered, center and right wing eligible. He's got 3 games above 21 minutes average time on ice in the last 5. He's getting great burn. He's shooting enough to give you a solid floor. They've got all of the schedule opportunity, and he is the next best thing to Perron in terms of what you hope for from Detroit.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of Kopp this year, just because Detroit has not had a lot of depth offensive scoring, and that is a challenge. I think he might be playing with Kubalik right now, but he's another guy that I think his deployment really affects his production. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a bad answer. I just don't know that that's a guy that I would personally be targeting.
He has continuously surprised me in a dynasty format where I roster lower opportunity players and continuously come up big. Like, it has been a kind of silently reliable season from Kopp, and considering the schedule and considering the opportunity that he's getting on the ice, I like it as one of your lower rostership opportunities right now.
Nate says, let's hear one fantasy hockey analyst outside of A&G you guys really respect and listen to when they voice an opinion. So you've got some notes here, Binksy. Why don't you touch on those?
Oh yeah, I wrote a diatribe. I love fantasy hockey. In general, I really love the voice and the foresight of Jeff Marek. It's not entirely centered on fantasy hockey, right? They just kind of talk about the league in general. But as far as fantasy hockey goes, I am a huge fan of the 5-hole fantasy hockey team. And as much as I love to listen to the show and its overall entertainment, which seriously is through the roof, they really have some well thought out perspectives. But I love that show in general and not specifically each member of the show. Like, I feel like they all put in an equal level of intuition and education and time into the show. If there's one person that I have to choose in fantasy hockey, my favorite fantasy talking head is Victor Nuno of Dauber and Fantasy Hockey Life. We can really kind of get into an echo chamber in fantasy hockey, and we talk about ads each week and hot streaks and cold streaks and goalie streams and etc. Like, it can really become, who's the most effusive about one player or who you like most on a show that can kind of sway you. But I really love the insight into the next generation that Victor and they on Fantasy Hockey Life and at Dauber focus on. So not just him and his insight, but his literal voice keeps me coming back to listen. Like, I know that's just one of the things that you happen upon when you're listening to a drove of people talk about the same subject. But I think I naturally gravitate towards his emotion about young players. And
Yeah,
as
man.
much as I would love to have more time to watch amateur hockey, I don't. So it's really eye-opening stuff, and I really, really love listening to their pod about young players.
Yeah, I like to echo a number of those names. I think Five Hole, obviously, like we talk about them all the time. I think they're great. They've been really nice to us. They've been really great for Apples and Genos. We have a lot of mutual listeners. I think I really like their vibe and I really like their voices as well. I think Victor Nuno, absolutely, you totally hit on that. I think him and Jesse over at Fantasy Hockey Life. There's really no one better there's I don't think there's better insight on dynasty league formats and prospects than Victor and Jesse at Fantasy Hockey Life. So they're doing something that's different than a lot of other fantasy hockey podcasts, and I really respect their opinions. And then I think the other one, kind of off the board a little bit, not necessarily like a podcast guy, but Dom Lecision. Really respect his advanced stats. I do use his projections. I have the last couple of years to help guide my drafting. I obviously, like, I use my own volition a little bit, but definitely use his value over replacement, and to a certain extent with forwards and defensemen. That is, I don't necessarily agree with the way that he values goalies compared to position players, but yeah, I definitely think that he has really good insight. But obviously, I don't want to plug him too much, because Nate has really great projections that compare really quite well to Dom Decision. So I definitely need to. I feel like I need to plug Nate's as well.
If he said fantasy hockey analyst outside of Apples and Genos,
yeah,
outside.
And that's what I know, but I just don't want I don't want to be like yeah, Dom Decision, number one projection guy. go check out his projections. Pay for the Athletic and get his projections, because they're the best there is. Because, like, they're great, and I respect his opinion. But I think Nate's are also great.
I get it. You're a company guy, but Nate said outside.
Boy. I gotta back my boy here. Dark Canuck 99 says, my opponent played Demko last night and got shelled. I need a couple safe goalie streams for the weekend back to back that won't kill my goals against average or save percentage. Thanks, guys. I guess we kind of touched on this a little bit. I think Korpisalo is probably your safest bet. I think Mads Sogard as well, if he gets Thursday and either Saturday or Sunday, I think is you're probably going to get the most out of him.
I mean, if you can get a stream out of Sogard with Philadelphia and Columbus, those are your best odds, right? But I think I would kind of play the field, and then if you can swing Korpisalo against Seattle, even though Seattle can just be a out of the miss gunner against goalies, that still may benefit you. But yeah, I think if you've got one ad, it's Sogard, and if you've got two ads, maybe Sogard and Korpisalo.
Dark Canuck 99 also asks if your league gave away awards to players at the end of the season in the following categories, who would win? Number 1, best draft value. Number 2, longest held waiver wire streamer. And number 3, biggest draft bust. Thanks again. Looking forward to the show this evening. Thank you, Dark Canuck 99. So why don't you touch on who do you think was the best draft value this year?
I think Carlson kind of runs away with this one, doesn't he?
100%.
From going almost undrafted to last few rounds. That's I feel like it's a boring answer, but best draft value has to be Carlson, going from nearly undrafted to how many is he projected to hit?
Oh, he might hit 100.
He
Like
might hit 100,
yeah,
right?
I think he
Like,
might hit
I
100.
didn't
Yeah,
want to say 100, not thinking it might not be
he's close
100.
to it.
But
I'll look at his
I
totals
mean,
now, but
nearly 100 points as an almost not drafted on the Sharks,
yeah,
right? Like that.
he has 91 points currently.
That has to be it, regardless of whether he hits the centennial or not. Like that.
Yeah,
That has to be it.
yeah, and that's on literally the last place team in the league, and he's still scoring even though they traded away Timo Meyer, and there's like essentially nothing left there. He's the guy that's running that offense, and it's unbelievable that he's doing this at this point in his career, especially after all those injuries.
Seth Jones has daydreams about being Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, man. I would say RNH is another one, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who is going to hit 100 points, almost definitely. And he was drafted around the same spot as Erik Karlsson, maybe even lower in some leagues. So that is really nice draft value. I think Zach Hyman as well. Both those guys that play on the Oilers power play, I think, are really benefiting from playing with McDavid and Draisaitl. But regardless, I think anyone that drafted those guys got really good value as well. What about longest held waiver wire streamer?
So I didn't really do any in-depth research to this. I just kind of went to my gut on these. But Brandon Hagel would be my guess here. Maybe you tag in one of the Avs second line, considering the playoff schedule. So if you're thinking about people that were streaming Comfer or Erod, maybe those were like longest held waiver wire streamers for people that were really forward thinking into the playoff schedule. I know I had a lot of people trying to buy those two off of me on the trade deadline, but I feel like Hagel would be my best guess here, given the length of the season and no one really trying to buy him at playoff time based on their playoff schedule being the opposite of the Avalanche. So I kind of chose two sides of the coin. What do you think?
For me personally, at least in our keep three, Carter Verhaeghe was my number one. I picked him up maybe the second or third week, and he was steady Eddie the rest of the year. He was a top 30, top 40 player in the scoring format that we use. And man, what value that was. That was quite a pickup. So I think anyone that picked up Verhaeghe early in the season, that was a good option there. Jamie Benn is another guy. I didn't pick him up personally, but I think we were hyping him up early in the season because he started out hot, and we were like, I don't know if this is gonna last. The underlyings look pretty good, but like I don't know about the deployment and whatnot. But he stayed on power play one the whole year, and he's really been really solid. It's been a true Renaissance year for Jamie Benn. So I think he's another guy. I think he's another guy that you could include in there. And last, biggest draft bust.
You can underline this one, man.
Yeah.
The easy favorite here is Huberdeau. Like,
yeah.
How many questions throughout the season do you think we fielded about when to drop Huberdeau?
Oh,
20?
Oh my gosh.
30?
Yeah. A lot.
Just for the show.
Every other episode.
Every other episode was about when to drop Huberdeau. I mean,
yeah.
Your biggest draft bust has to be Huberdeau. Like, I think you have a short list past that, but man, it has to be Huberdeau. He has to be the biggest.
I'm curious what happens with Huberdeau next year if Daryl Sutter's fired. Because that could be a really interesting. I have no idea where he's going to be drafted in terms of fantasy hockey, and there could be potential for some value there. Like, this guy is scoring at 40%, 30 to 40%.
I'll take the bait. What's the earliest round that you snipe Huberdeau next year? 4? Is it 4? Do you take a swing in the league at fourth round?
Risky. That's pretty risky, I think.
We're talking about 100-point player last year.
I know, but he's now what, a 50-point player? Like,
Yeah, but
almost.
that's an aberration to his career, right? Thus
It's
far.
true. No,
So
you're right. You're totally right. Yeah, that's tough. I think probably 5 or 6, round 5 or 6. I would be jumping on him, and I think,
can't wait to argue about this 8 weeks
yeah,
from now.
I have to do more research on it, but that's definitely a discussion. That'll be a fun discussion in the offseason. I think a lot of fantasy hockey podcasts are going to be talking about that.
I think the
yeah,
most clicked on fantasy hockey article going into next season is where to draft Huberto.
Yeah, for sure. Hedman and Victor Hedman and Aaron Ekblad, I think, are a couple guys that are busts. Like they were. I mean, Hedman specifically getting drafted in the second round really has not returned a ton of value. I think he's definitely in the conversation. And yeah, obviously Huberto. If some people took him in the first round, and that's awful. That's so awful. If that's your top guy, Ekblad. Also, I mean, he's had injuries as he usually does, but he's had stretches where he's done almost nothing, like putting up zeros across the board. So that's not great either. Zebra Dan is back. Says, hopefully you guys are still going strong in your fantasy playoffs. How many leagues is too many for you guys? We were talking the other day about how I went from 1 league my first year to 17 the second year playing fantasy hockey. I found my sweet spot at 4, but this year I tried my hand at Dynasty and ended up taking over 3 Dynasty teams mid-season. So now I'm back up to too many. Man, 17 is too many for way sure. That's way too many. I currently I have 5 redraft leagues this year and 1 Dynasty, and I feel like that's good for me. So 6 leagues. I feel like I could adequately pay attention to all of them. But then, I mean, obviously there were some that weren't as competitive where I wouldn't pay attention to it too much. Like I wouldn't be focusing on streamers. So I think probably the sweet spot is 4 or 5, to be honest. So, yeah, in order to like optimally be paying attention and like being competitive in all of those, I think probably 4 to 5. I think that's a nice little sweet spot. What do you think, Binksy?
I think that's a nice round number. I think the most important part is the actual statistics and the weights of your league. If you're doing 7 leagues and they're all different, that is a way different thing to deal with than, say, 3 leagues of one type and 3 leagues of another type, right? Because you're having to shift your mindset to every single tab that you open, and that single shift can be really, really important in fantasy sports. So I did 5 this year, and I will probably move up to 6 next year, but I'm only going to add a league that is very similar to a league that I'm already in. And I think that's the most important part. I do think that if you're doing 17, that is very clearly too many. If you're doing 17, then we don't have a hotline for you, but message us on Discord, and we'll teach you the ways to kind of rein in your life and fantasy hockey and the minutia in between. Because Zebra Dan, if you're doing 17, man, you're doing too much.
Yeah, that's wild. I don't even know how you could get into 17 fantasy hockey leagues unless you're just doing like a ton of public ones. Maybe you just have a ton of friends that love fantasy hockey. I don't know.
Hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. So I think that's an excellent point about league formats. Like if they're all completely different from each other, that makes total sense. Like I think it's even harder to stay on top of all your leagues. So I think that round number kind of decreases at that point if your leagues are kind of like all different from each other. I think we're gonna have to stop here. Just because we're very long. So Fantasy Hockey Professor, I know you asked a question about diving into the 0G strategy. I think we'll probably touch on that in the off season. So we will get to that. I apologize for not getting to your question. I just don't want to go like insanely long here. We've had a really good time answering questions. So I think we better call it a night. So thank you for listening. Check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. Shoutouts to the band there for providing our music. Their Spotify link is in the episode description. Give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Binksy is at Binklemania. Nate is at Apples Genos. Blake is at Blake Creamer SE. And I'm at JustJoshin41. Please practice safe stats and happy streaming. Have a good one, folks.
Good night, world.